Welcome to the Winner's Playbook. Every winner needs a game plan, and this one's for you. Disclaimer: the information contained in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into account your personal circumstances. Please head to the show notes if you wish to book in a free 15-minute call to discuss your personal situation.
Welcome back to the Winner's Playbook. You get a raise, you land a better job, or you start making more money, and suddenly your expenses rise just as fast. Does that sound familiar? Well, that's lifestyle creep. And if you're not careful, it can eat away your financial progress before you even realize it. In this episode, we're going to be breaking down why lifestyle creep happens, how to recognize it, and the smart ways to enjoy your success without letting your income disappear. And if you want to build wealth whilst still living well, this one is for you. So Billy, let's get into it, mate. First and foremost, how's the week tracking? Markets are quite volatile, having a lot of clients reach out at this point in time. What are your thoughts on what the markets are doing at the moment?
Yes, well, it looks like Trump's honeymoon period has well and truly worn off. And, markets sort of jumped up when he was first elected, and now, all these tariffs are causing some stress. So we're seeing share prices fall. So, look, from our perspective, nothing's changed really, because we're always focusing on the long term, of course. But some interesting conversations with clients and fund managers and so on. So it's good. It's always interesting.
Yeah, always an opportunity, I find it, these little corrections that happen. I actually get a little excited when these corrections happen. And mind you, in saying that, we've had good returns for a strong sort of 18, 24 months, a bit of up and down in between, but it's been really strong returns, particularly over the last 12 months. So I always tell clients when we're seeing these great returns, it's only going to be healthy at some point in time for there to be a bit of a pullback. The markets aren't just going to keep on rising. And then if you've got some cash sitting on the sidelines, we can actually take advantage and start maybe chipping away at these lower prices. And that's been a lot of my conversations with clients as of late that have got money sitting there. And we've spoken about that dollar cost averaging strategy before. I'm a big fan of it when there's a bit of volatility around. And I suppose that's when you can make some good money, when the markets are actually falling off.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I get nervous when the market keeps hitting record high after record high, because it just means the next correction is going to be more brutal. We prefer to have these little healthy pullbacks every now and then. So all good.
Totally agree. And I missed obviously the last week's episode with Eddie, so I wasn't here for last week's episode, but I was overseas the last couple of weeks in Thailand and the Philippines. So I was over in the Philippines seeing our team that we've got over there with the business Lavera, and that team is pushing nearly 55 staff now, which is very, very, very exciting. So I was over there for about 5 days working in the office, and then went off to Thailand for about a week for a conference with EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization. And it was awesome. It was just full of other business owners, and got to meet some of the best and brightest minds in business in Australia. And there was a couple of keynote speakers that spoke about their journey, and one in particular who built a business from nothing to over 300 million, then listed it, then got ousted as the CEO. Then the business kind of went bust, and they tried to get him back in, and it was too late, and now the company's actually delisted. So it was a pretty cool journey to listen along to, but fortunately for that guy, he did take off a fair bit of money when they listed, so he did get a bit of an exit there at that point in time. But no, it was a really good trip, and got some amazing takeaways, most importantly to implement in the business, and might even talk about some of those on some future podcasts. But that's actually not the topic for today. Talking lifestyle creep, this is one that I see many clients battle with. I don't think anyone is immune to some form of lifestyle creep in some way, shape or form there. So if we start talking about lifestyle creep there, Billy, just if we can try and define a bit of what is lifestyle creep, and why does it happen to the best of us?
Yes, same as you, Josh. I see it a lot, and even myself, you're always battling it, because essentially you work really hard. Like, let's go back. So you finish school, you study, you get a job, you start on generally for most people, a pretty low salary. You move out. You might move out from your parents' house. Now you've got all the costs of running a house. So for a lot of people, you feel like you don't have money for a long time, and then if you keep pushing through that, hopefully you have a breakthrough, right? And you start earning some good money. And now you think, I've got extra money. That means I can live a better lifestyle. But the common trap people fall into is they get ahead of themselves and they go too hard on living that better lifestyle. And often there might be pent up like frustration that they're struggling to pay the bills or whatever. So they start earning money, and then they let loose, and sometimes that can be a cycle that just keeps repeating, and it means you'll never build wealth or never really actually feel like you have money. Yeah. So how do you think about that?
Yeah, I've seen some pretty severe cases in the last couple of years, and lifestyle creep, I think it comes in quite a few different forms as well. There could be just your general lifestyle, your cost of your spending just constantly going up because you keep getting those pay rises. You go from getting your first job at maybe 50 grand. I was earning about that when I first entered the advice industry, and then you go up, you crack through the 100, and then it's like, holy crap, this feels like a lot of money. But so then quite quickly that lifestyle starts keeping up with the rate that your earnings are growing, and that's the lifestyle creep situation. And no matter how much money you're earning, sometimes that doesn't mean you have any ability to create wealth, because earnings go up, lifestyle goes up, and they just keep going up at the same rate. And earning $1 million, you could still quite easily have that being spent. And I've seen some, like I said, some severe cases in the last couple of years with a couple of clients of mine, which fortunately, after working with me for some time, I was able to sort of break their habits in a way with them, but it wasn't easy. And I had a couple of clients that were earning north of 500 grand quite easily, and you wouldn't believe, like, saving nothing and didn't have like a huge mortgage relative to what they were earning. So you would think that there is some sort of earnings capacity there, but I can tell you right now there wasn't. And it took me working with them solidly every month for about 9 months until we broke through. And now they're consistently saving 10 grand a month. That's not saving though, they're investing that money mostly. But they've gone from nothing to, a surplus of well and truly over 10 grand a month, and feeling a lot better about their life and where their money's flowing. So yeah, lifestyle creep's probably one of the biggest inhibitors to growing wealth, I would say, because you can earn all this money, you can quite easily spend it. And going into that is, homes, cars. So you go from living in this one house, well, income goes up. Now, honey, we're feeling better now. We can buy more, home upgrade, first car, new car, luxury car, and then you kind of just feel like you're never ultimately getting ahead. And I've seen that so many times, and that's what we're going to be really unpacking today. Like, what are some of the strategies and ways to kind of break the lifestyle creep situation, and how do we do that ultimately with our clients? But if we talk first and foremost, Billy, around, how can people actually recognize they're spending more than they're earning? Like, where do we start with clients generally around, we're talking cash flow here. Like, what's usually our go-to? What are we doing when we're speaking to clients and they're feeling like they're just pouring all this money into a bucket and it's just constantly leaking out and they can't plug that hole? What are we looking at there?
Yeah, well, I think as advisors, we have some good insight into this, because every day we are looking at household budgets, people's cash flow, how much they earn, how much they spend. And so we can pretty quickly identify where that's happening, because you look at the household, how many kids do they have? What are their incomes? Okay, where do they live? Do they have a mortgage? Do they have cars? How did they finance the cars?
Yep.
And then the big one, okay, how much do you have in savings or investments? And if the answer is very little, but when you're looking at how much they earn, you're thinking, well, there's a huge capacity to save here, then that tells you, yeah, they're probably spending a fair bit of money where they don't need to be.
Yeah.
And then from there, you're just asking more questions, right, about their life and so on. And more often than not, there's a handful of things eating up that cash flow. It's usually a mortgage, cars with loans attached or leases, a lot of overseas travel. It's usually those big ticket items. Is that what you see?
Yeah, it is. And like, adding to what you said there, any clients I ever meet, cash flow is just such an important part of it. So the first thing I do after we've had our initial meetings is I actually show them a bit of a rough outline as to their situation, and comparing that against, say it's a couple with 2 kids, I'll benchmark that for them and say, okay, if you've got all this income coming in and these are your liabilities, here's a bit of a benchmark comparison on the assumption you are living a lavish lifestyle, which nearly everyone is. No one's usually spending below their means. Most people are generally out there and they're enjoying it. But show that to the clients in that second meeting so they get an idea or an insight as to, there is a bit of a problem here initially, and then getting into the point of, well, how do we actually implement this stuff with our clients clients. The one thing I always encourage people to do is do a bit of like a budget reconciliation. So you can go onto moneysmart.gov and you can download a free budget planner. And that gives you a good breakdown of all of the different expenditure items usually in your life, like mortgage, rent, food, bills, gym, whatever it may be, medical. And that's even something I personally do for myself, at least annually, and then get a real good insight as to where all of the money actually is flowing. And that in itself can be pretty revealing. I can tell you when I did that for the first time with my wife many years ago, that blew her mind when we broke it down and she saw where all of the money was going, and then naturally got a lot more conscious around that expenditure. And that's what I find happens to most of my clients as well. When they just kind of have some, they can see where all of their money's flowing, and they have that transparency. It's pretty eye-opening, and then from there, then we start to actually make the changes to put a structure in place. But what about practical ways, Billy, to control expenses without feeling deprived? How do you do that? How do you try to have the best of both worlds here, if you can in any way?
Yeah, well, that's it. You only live once, so it's not about like I need to cut out all unnecessary spending immediately. How do you go about it? Well, it's about figuring out what you're spending money on that's not actually adding any value or joy to your life. And we'll go back to cars because that's one of the most common things. And
such a trap.
It's nice having a new car, of course, but is it worth having a new car if that's going to rip a huge chunk of money out of your budget every single year just to have that new car?
Yep.
So it's about identifying those things you're spending money on that's not bringing you joy or improving your life. And often addressing those bigger items first is where you'll get the most bang for your buck.
Mm-hmm.
Once you've done that, and then you're looking at just the day-to-day spending, I find that's tougher. Like spending money at the pharmacy, at Dan Murphy's, Uber Eats, like that side of things is probably tougher. And that's where having some sort of cash flow system in place is probably more effective. Yeah. And how do you go about that? Like with having a cash flow system to address just the day-to-day small amounts that sort of add up each week?
Yeah, it's something nearly every client will be doing. And now I just want to go back. I think we might have had our first reference to YOLO there, Billy. I think we might not have had YOLO on the podcast before. So there you go. There's number one. But yeah, talking cash flow, the biggest thing is being proactive and not reactive with this stuff. And that goes to when you're planning holidays and so on as well. But the way that we do it with all clients, and I do exactly this myself, is various buckets for the different accounts and expenditures that are commonly occurring. So, whether you've got a mortgage or you're renting, that's obviously one major expense that has to be paid. It's non-negotiable. Then you've got all your fixed expenses, so all of your bills. Again, non-negotiable. You got to pay your bills. You got to pay your rates, utilities, etc. Getting into that, though, when you start digging into some of those fixed expenses, there can be some discretionary items, though, that, you've got your direct debits every month to your subscription, Netflix, Stan, or whatever it may be. And that's where we can start looking at, like, if I see a client and they've got 10 different subscriptions, like I'm probably going to tell them to pull back there and maybe have one or two. So there is some discretionary nature sometimes to those fixed expenditures, but most of those you have to pay, like your rego. You got to pay your rego. But it's the one that everyone really falls down on is that week-to-week discretionary expenditure. That's where I find you really do need to have some rules of engagement around what you're spending week to week, because if we've accounted for everything else, we've accounted for the mortgage or rent, we've accounted for all of the fixed bills, and that's basically your cost of living. What's left over is, groceries, food, maybe fuel, fun, going out, dinners, restaurants, friends, drinks, bar, whatever it may be for you. That's where there does need to be some rules of engagement, because if there isn't, there's just kind of no limit to how much you can spend on a week-to-week basis. So as an example, in my own situation, and again, I do the same thing with my clients, but every week, myself and my wife, we have an amount that goes to an account, our everyday spending card. And that's got a set dollar figure that goes there every Sunday, and we have to make that last through to the following week Sunday. That's a fixed amount. That's where all of our daily expenditure comes from. We used to do the whole credit card situation. You get up all the points, you keep the money in the offset. Fortunately, I'm with a bank that's going to allow multiple offsets. So I do like having money in multiple offset accounts, which is another conversation. But that whole credit card strategy can work well, but in most situations you do end up spending more money, and those points are not worth more than the dollars that you actually end up spending from the credit card, because you don't have as much transparency on where that money's flowing, as opposed to, say, you allocate $800 a week to your everyday spending account. You know you've got $800 there to spend, whereas when you're just tapping and going on a credit card, it's very easy to get lost in that expenditure. So having those buckets, having rules around some of those expenditures, particularly the discretionary amount, and that's the biggest part that I actually help my clients with in terms of formulating what it will be for them. And that varies. Like if you've got a single person, it's probably going to not be a huge amount that weekly spend. Got a couple with three kids that are in their late teens, 5 people living in the household, well, that weekly spend is going to be probably quite high. So there's no set rule around that. And that's where we provide tailored advice to clients around their cash flow. But that's really the way I approach it. And the other part I wanted to mention though as well is with, balancing those expenses and not feeling deprived. So you don't want to, just be squirreling away all of your money, not, and just saving and investing. Some people want to do that, mind you, but the majority of people I find want a balance in there as well. And that's where it could be. And I've started doing this with a couple of clients and actually think about having some milestone points or checkpoints of which they hit those wealth parameters that I'm going to set with them. Like as an example, clients worth $750,000 now. In a couple of years' time, I think they're going to be worth 1.5 million because of the advice or whatever it may be. I've got one client that wants to get a Rolex watch, and they've fallen into the lifestyle creep trap though. So they're like, get it now, get the new car. But they're a bit more conscious of it. And then after we spoke, I'm like, well, how about we just set in place kind of like a bit of a game here. Let's get the wealth up first, so you actually have some wealth behind you and not, you see a lot of people out there just showing off all of their fancy things, and behind the scenes, we see it, they're not actually worth much money at all. So you can get fun with it like that, and that is something I am starting to consider with some of my clients that are motivated and do want to sort of have some of those more nice things, or whatever you want to call it. That gratification they get from having some of those luxuries in life. So that is another way I'm trying to balance that whole lifestyle. Because if you are working hard, you're earning good dollars, you're growing a business, or you're working at a job and you're getting great bonuses and you're excelling. Look, I'm not opposed to having some fun along the way, and it's just figuring out, what does fun look like for you? Like, is fun going on a big family holiday, or is fun, buying a nice watch? I don't know. Those are things that I do. I have started addressing with clients. What are your thoughts there, Billy? Would you add anything to that?
No, well, I've got a question for you. What do you tell clients whether they should have credit cards or not?
Yeah, good one. My way of approaching that is, if they don't have them, I don't ever tell them to get one. If they've got a credit card and they're already using it, I will only let them pay their fixed bills on there. I don't let them do any daily expenditure with it. I know some will still do that, but I strip away any daily expenditure from that credit card, because they're not going to overpay on their bills. So providing you can actually pay all the bills through a credit card, sometimes you can't because there's a cash advance and things like that. But the majority of the time you can pay all of your bills through your credit card, and any of those subscriptions, direct debits, etc. Those things that you're not spending week to week and you can't overspend on, I'm not opposed to using that for credit card, and you get some points. But stripping away that daily expenditure, that's the big key point there.
I agree. And this took me a few years to figure out the best way to manage this, but I think a credit card's fine for points and all that stuff if you have a short list of expenses that are allowed to go on that credit card.
Yeah, exactly.
So as you say, some automated bills, and then it must be a few big ticket things like, if you're booking flights, if a weekly grocery shop, there might just be, 8 specific expenses that can all go on the credit card, but not just day-to-day ad hoc tapping of the card. That can't be the credit card.
No, that stuff that's lethal, and that's where everyone falls apart when they start doing that. But if we're talking about, and this kind of, I think we've kind of just touched on it in the points that we raised there, but talking about, is it okay to upgrade your lifestyle, and if so, well, how do you do it responsibly? Maybe before I throw to you, Billy, I'll tell you some of the points I was going to touch on there. And I think it all ultimately just comes down to, you just have to define what is success for you and what makes you happy. And if that is those holidays or luxury items or whatever it may be, that's okay. And I think some of my clients I have these conversations with is they actually do value their lifestyle more than building wealth. And that's completely okay. And I think you just got to be real with yourself. And ultimately, if you value your lifestyle and living for the now, and you're happy to work through to age 60 until when you can access your superannuation, Cool. It's your call. I have absolutely nothing against that whatsoever. And that's ultimately what I do see is the right thing to do for some clients. So I think most importantly, you just got to figure out what is going to work for you. Don't compare yourself to other people. And yeah, if you want to live a good lifestyle, just do it in moderation. But then don't have the victim's mindset when you're in your late 50s or you're in your 50s and you want to have that early retirement. And then you haven't taken the action along the way to get there, which, again, I've got a lot of clients that do want to have flexibility in their 50s. But what do you think about that, Billy? Because life's ultimately full of trade-offs. So it's the way it is.
I agree. There's a huge variation between each person, each household, each family around their specific situation, what's important to them. It comes back. Okay, here's an example. I had a client recently, without revealing anything personal about them. They're in their 30s. They used to be in the military. They've got a massive super fund for their age. So we know if that person keeps working till 60 years old, they're going to have no issue whatsoever after 60.
Yep.
That's a different scenario to, let's say, someone who did a double degree and a PhD and didn't get their first grad job until 33 years old, and they've got no super at all, and they're living in a share house. That person needs to have probably a different long-term strategy to the person who's 35 and already has a giant super fund. So it's a huge, and then there's people who never have kids or single, no kids. That's a different strategy from the family with 4 kids all going to private school. and a massively different level of complexity as well.
Totally. And I think that that's the most important thing. Like this varies. There's no one solution for absolutely everyone. Like everyone's got a different life and different motivations, and there's just really no cookie cutter approach to it in the end.
Even a family who lives in Sydney and they love Sydney, they always want to be in Sydney. That's a huge factor. The fact they've got a big family and want to live in Sydney compared to, say, someone who lives in Ballarat and, their house costs $400,000 or something. Like, the circumstances are just so different. So it's very much customized. But I guess the key thing is you don't want to be living in financial stress all the time. And you don't want to be, every time you book a holiday, you feel all this guilt. So the key thing is to have a system, know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And when you're spending on those things that make you happy, it's factored into your plan.
Yeah, and that kind of leads us into some of the closing points that we're going to discuss on is like, what are the financial habits that can help people enjoy success without losing control of their money? I think we've kind of touched on most of them. Like set some rules around your expenditure, schedule holidays in advance. Like for me, like I have a holiday account. Every fortnight money goes into that account, and we're not going to be reactive with that stuff. We are proactive, but that's where I do find, again, clients fall down with because I'll see them 1 month and then I'll see them 3 months later and they're like, oh, we just booked a holiday out of nowhere to Bali or whatever it may be. I'm like, oh, that wasn't discussed. That's just come up out of nowhere. So I think just being deliberate around a lot of your decision making, review your cash flow annually as well. It's not a set and forget. Your, lifestyle is going to change. If you've got kids getting older, mortgages coming down, income from job, business, whatever it may be, it's always going to change. So it's not a set and forget. You do have to be proactive with this stuff. And that's where like an annual review of it, whether that is yourself or you work with an advisor like us, that's really the value in working with an advisor, is that accountability aspect to it. Because the amount of clients I've seen who, unfortunately have tried to go it on their own and then they don't stick to it. It's like going to the gym. I'm right into the gym, and unfortunately I've bedded down the habit, so I don't need a personal trainer or someone to hold me accountable. But earlier on, having someone that holds you accountable to it is very important to show up and implement. And that's a big part of what we do with our clients as advisors. But the other points I was going to mention there, like interest rates obviously have started to fall a little bit in Australia. And when interest rates falling, you got a mortgage, and now your repayments are lower. Don't just let that money go to waste. So either you're paying extra back now onto your mortgage because the interest rates come down a little bit, or you've got more money to save and invest. When you do your tax return and maybe you get some tax back, well, that's not just, a bonus to go out and spend. It could be, again, if that's what you want to do with your life, but that could be more savings. So I think you've got to be looking at these things often. Don't ever compare yourself to other people as well. I think that's very dangerous. I do see some people that get trapped into that and want to live in certain locations and drive certain cars, and they're always comparing themselves, like, keeping up with the Joneses. I think that's a very dangerous game to play, and you will never, ever be satisfied if you are comparing yourself to other people, because there is always going to be someone out there who is more successful and has more and is probably younger than you as well, no matter whatever your situation is, unless you're Elon Musk. I'll put a caveat to that. But yeah, not comparing yourself to others, just live your own life, and don't fall into the pressures of sometimes maybe, what others are telling, or, other people are saying around you and what you have to do. And sometimes that influence could even be coming from your parents, and they want you to go on a certain trajectory in life and, get a house, pay off the home as soon as you can. Live your own life, figure out what works for you and what's happiness, and ultimately what success looks like, I think. What would you add there, Billy, if anything? I think we've covered it off pretty good today. Yeah,
the last thing I want to mention, like for listeners who are hearing this and feeling guilty and feeling like they aren't on top of what they're doing, I will add there are other factors you can't control as well. Like the COVID thing really screwed up a household budget because all of a sudden your home loan rate's 2%. RBA is telling you they're going to stay at 2%. The government's throwing out job seeker, job keeper. So there's cash flying around everywhere. They're giving incentives to do home renovations. Remember that? The home builder grant or whatever.
I forgot about that, but that's
a lot of people felt like, if you're lucky enough to keep your job and everything through COVID, a lot of people felt like they had a lot of money, and they probably adjusted their lifestyle. Then all of a sudden rates go from 2% to 6%. Everything goes up in price 10 or 20% with inflation. So don't feel bad if you're guilty or like you've done something wrong if you're feeling squeezed right now. Like that's what's happening out there. So there's other stuff outside of your control as well, and that's where it comes back to your point. You need to revisit this every year because things change every year. So that's my final message, Josh, and something I've been seeing with clients a lot.
Yeah, it's a good way to end that COVID time. I tell you, I actually forgot about a lot of those things. And remember when people were taking 20 grand out of super, you were able to take out $20,000, 10,000 twice, and the amount of people I've seen done that didn't qualify to actually to do it. Like, God, those were weird times. There's probably an episode just to be done on learnings from that period that we went through. And like you said about the mortgage situation and interest rates, and a lot of people went out and bought homes because the Reserve Bank actually said, I think rates weren't going to go up for like 2 or 3 years. And then I think a few months later, rates started to move. So there's some learnings in there in itself. But yeah, we've obviously covered off a lot today. And if this episode is giving you value and insight, guys, please do subscribe, leave a review, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and ultimately we'll see you on the next podcast. Until then, Billy, take care, mate.
Thanks, Josh.